right, I have just a few announcements while people are finishing up getting some breakfast. I'm Representative Lisa Hango. I represent Richford, Berkshire, Franklin, and Highgate. And I will introduce everybody. Just wanted to let you know we're going to have a very hard stop at 9:30. Some people need to leave a little bit earlier than that to get to meetings or appointments, so they'll just get up and leave. Several legislators from Franklin County were unable to make it today due to a funeral, illness, doctor's appointments, meetings that conflicted with this. So I apologize for that. But I think for Richford, Vermont, we got a pretty good turnout here. We have four representatives and a senator, pardon me, who are here with us. I will make introductions. I just introduced myself. I live in Berkshire, by the way. This is Representative Alan Penny DeMar from Enosburg, representing Enosburg and Montgomery. Representative Wayne LaRush, who is my district mate and lives in Franklin. Senator Bob Norris, who represents all of Franklin County except Fletcher.
Except Fletcher, Fairfax, and Montgomery.
Okay, except
to include
Fletcher,
Elberg
Fairfax,
and Grand Isle.
and Montgomery, but including Alberg, which is in Grand Isle County. And Representative Mike McCarthy, who represents 2/3 of St. Albans City.
You got it.
Excellent. Maybe we can just go down the table and say which committees we serve on. I serve on the House Committee for Government Operations and Military Affairs.
I'm on the Health Committee.
And I'm on Corrections and Institutions, which is the Capitol Bill Committee.
I am on two committees in the Senate. One is Senate Judiciary and Senate GovOps.
And you've got a heavy GovOps presence here. I serve as the chair in the House of the GovOps and now Government Operations and Military Affairs Committee. So we've all got some new jurisdictions this year in the House. I'm very happy to serve with Lisa, with Representative Vigo. We have a lot of fun in
And
GovOps.
I am very happy to have Representative McCarthy as the chairperson of my committee. We've got a really good group, I think, down in Montpelier this year. Already, I feel like we're doing a lot of collaborative work and getting some things accomplished. So that's really helpful. Just a couple of ground rules. Everyone has a chance to speak. I just would like you to raise your hand, and when you're called on, to state who you are and where you live, and then ask your question or make your comment. We are not here to debate. We as legislators are here to learn from our constituents what your needs are, and debate amongst each other at this forum is not really something that we're going to engage in today because we do have limited time. But if there are questions you have that need answers, we will get back to you. So, with that being said, we don't have a formal topic. The last time we held legislative breakfasts, we had a topic for each one of them. This time is kind of a free-for-all, whatever you want to ask about. So, has anybody come here today with any particular issues? And if so, do you have a particular legislator that you would like to direct your question to or your comment? Ma'am?
Hi there.
Hi.
Christy Lynch from Berkshire. First of all, I want to say thank you to Representative Hango for putting out the legislative updates on Front Porch Forum. I think that is a fantastic way to reach the folks who don't necessarily, read the tribune in the newspaper and that type of thing. So I truly, truly appreciate it, and I would encourage others to make use of that forum as well. So my first question has to do with H28, and it was related to diversion and expungement of records. And so I believe in looking at H28 that they struck through and replaced the juvenile portion of H28 and changed it to adult. So upon the completion of adult diversion, this is what's going to happen. Does anybody know if there are any other changes regarding expungements that are planned?
I'm going to ask Senator Norris, who sits on Judiciary in the Senate, if you've heard anything more about that. I have not. I don't often get to speak with members on the House Judiciary Committee, so have you heard?
I haven't heard a lot about H-28, obviously, because I'm in the Senate. I know that there's things in the works right now in reference to expungement/sealing. I have my own thoughts about that, obviously. However, it does come into play with both juveniles and adults after a 2-year period as far as the automatic expungement and/or sealing of the records. But nothing has gone through our committee as of yet. As soon as it does, I was on House Judiciary last year, and the expungement sealing was a big issue last year on House Judiciary. And I wasn't exactly favorable toward expungement. I don't oppose the sealing of records, but expungement means it's gone. There's no more, and depending on what jobs, or if you're going through firearms to do a background check on firearms, whatever else. So that was my opposition to last year in House Judiciary, as a matter of fact, but we haven't had that in front of us as of yet.
And then just a follow-up question, and it's gone. Sorry.
I can answer that.
Okay. And then I just had one more question about the governor's budget address and this 1.3 million that he is proposing go toward the consolidated dispatch in Chittenden County, which I understand, doesn't really affect you folks too much, but just wondering if anybody has any information on kind of the background of that at all.
Lisa, do you want me to talk about dispatch?
Yeah, that would be great, because the Chittenden County consolidation, I'm not super familiar with.
Yeah, so what I will say broadly is that there's been an elephant in the room in government operations committees for a long time, which is that many communities have access to dispatch from the Vermont State Police that they've relied on for years, and so they, from their local budgets or their emergency services, don't pay into any kind of regional or other municipal system. And then many other communities have a PSAP that's stood up. For instance, like I'm in the city of St. Albans, we serve a number of communities. I think we're up to something like 16 right now as the main PSAP, and then we've got other sort of overlapping dispatch that we provide for some emergency services. And there are right now 6 PSAPs if you include the 2 state police regions, and the state police have made it really clear for years they're getting out of the business, and the level of service that they can offer given the staffing that they have is going down. So what the governor I think is trying to do is, like, that 1.3 million is sort of low-hanging fruit. There's the regional, there is an obvious path to do some of that consolidation, and he's basically saying, go forth, go ahead and move forward with that, because that project is there to be done. The problem that we have really is that I say the opportunity we've parked more money. I believe it's about $9 million. I have to go back and look at this. And I'm not sure, because we just got the governor's budget on Friday, whether that 1.3 is part of the 9, so I could get back to you on that. But we've parked a bunch of money to try to facilitate that kind of thing, so that we can make sure that every community, when you pick up the phone, you need an ambulance, you need the police, that there is a qualified person to route your call to the right service. There are different levels of service, so there's an equity of service, there's an equity of who pays. I've heard from the chair of Senate GovOps, Senator Hardy, that she would like to really start a dispatch bill in her committee. I'm going to take parallel testimony that Representative Hango and I will hear about dispatch generally. But what we saw from the commissioner of the Department of Public Safety was that they basically said, it's up to you, legislature. you need to have a conversation with all of your communities and figure this out. So if you have specific input for us, Right now, the whole question of dispatch, who pays for it, and what level of service Vermonters should expect is wide open because there isn't a proposal from the administration. There's kind of an acknowledgement that we have this issue where the state police are getting out of the business. There are fewer and fewer dispatch staff to manage the calls. And the fear that we've had for years is that one day, some Vermonter in some small town that's relying on that service is gonna call up and need emergency services of some kind and not be able to get their call routed properly. So that day isn't here yet, but we can kind of see the writing on the wall. So this biennium over the next 2 years, I think I have a strong feeling, and Senator Hardy, who's the chair of Senate GovOps, has a strong feeling that now's the time to have this hard conversation about what level of service and who pays, and take this money that we have and probably some more and stand up the services we need and get the state police out of the business. I believe that we will end up with a regional dispatch model, not a statewide sort of monopoly, but we may have kind of a statewide organizational structure or a funding mechanism. All of that's open question right now. There isn't like some specific bill or plan on the table. I hope that helps.
It does. I just want to voice my concern in regards to this, is that there was obviously, so this is, the regional dispatch, Chittenden County Regional Dispatch has been on the table since 2016, I think. And they haven't been able to move this thing forward. My concern is that we're gonna throw 1.3 million at a project that hasn't been able to get off the ground. I would like to see that everybody goes back to the table and they come up with a new business plan, because obviously, you know, from a business aspect, that's what we have to put forth, but, that they have a new business plan to say, okay, we recognize that our plans over here didn't work, so we're not going to throw good money back into bad ideas, and that's my concern.
Well, we had an opportunity, I think, to provide some overview now, so we can ask those tough questions of the locals and the DPS officials that are supportive of that budget allocation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if I might just add on to that, I happen to know where your bailiwick is as far as dispatching is concerned here. Dispatching is always referred to as the heart of the operation, and patrol is the backbone, so to speak. As everyone knows, there was 8 communities in the greater Chittenden County area who wanted to get in on the dispatching, and slowly or quickly it's falling apart as we sit here. So there's now 4 remaining. So like Representative McCarthy said, I've been approached by my chair in GovOps, and she has brought up to the point that we're going to be sitting down and having these hard discussions. And she asked if I'd be interested in having a discussion. And I said, well, yes, I can. I'll certainly add whatever I can to it after having running a department where we had our own dispatching service. But E911 is above and beyond what we're used to dealing with. And to say at the very least this isn't going to be a very convoluted process would be the big lie. I mean, when you're talking dispatching services, we've been talking regional dispatching services for years in the state of Vermont, for years. And we need to make sure that we do it and do it the right way and address these concerns, all of our concerns, as we pick the phone up and look for emergency services.
Thank you for that question. Anyone else?
Oh, I can come up with more.
We don't know if we have the answers, though.
Yes, Mr. Collins, please state your name and where you live.
Eric Collins, I live here in town. And I'm gonna sit, if you don't mind.
That's
Ease
fine.
to me in. I haven't heard any rumblings in the press, and I'm wondering where the legislature, in particular the House, sits on impeachment of the sheriff-elect of Franklin County.
Well, I think you and I are looking at each other.
Yeah.
We have not had any formal hearings yet on that, so I really can't speak to that. And as you noted, it does start in the House. So perhaps Chairman McCarthy might have something additional that he's learned through his leadership role.
So what I will say very, very carefully is that I personally, as a citizen in Franklin County, am very, very concerned about John Grismore becoming the sheriff. And there is currently a misdemeanor simple assault charge against him. I believe that his law enforcement certification, if it hasn't already been suspended, has been suspended pending an investigation from the Criminal Justice Council. And that there's a forthcoming Brady letter that is going to come from the state's attorney that will undermine his ability to be a credible affiant, which, you know, the person who signs off on investigation. So I'm pretty concerned. So I want to just say that I recognize the concern. The challenge that we have is that the Vermont Constitution sets up sheriff, and I believe Senator Norris here, I'm conscious that I'm sitting next to a well-tenured sheriff, could tell you more about this, but they're an executive judicial official that once they're elected for 4 years, it is very, very challenging, even if the public outcry was enormous, for the legislature to find specific examples of the kind of conduct that's laid out in the Constitution and precedent that would allow you to have the House adopt articles of impeachment, get the 2/3 vote that you need in the House to have those articles go to the Senate, have prosecutors appointed from the House to go over to the Senate, and then the Senate becomes like a jury. It's kind of like what we saw in the impeachment of Trump down in DC. It's that kind of a process that's laid out. I would not want to begin that formal process unless I was pretty darn sure that we'd be able to be successful in the end. And so I'm really concerned about the sheriff, and I'd love to hear from folks about how the public feels. But I think that the options that we have as legislators don't give us a great path to success, that it could be very, very challenging, even if the public and the vast majority of legislators wanted to remove the sheriff, because the main thing that I think most of us are concerned about, the incident that was in the video from August, that happened before the election. People had an opportunity for somebody else and they didn't. And so the constitutional setup that we have right now is challenging. Senator Hardy has a bill that I believe is going to be in Senate GovOps to look at sheriff's long term. There's talk about changing the Constitution to give the legislature more power to require things. Right now, sheriff's not required to be a certified law enforcement officer. That's something we might consider. So there's a bill on the wall to nibble around at the edges of what we can do with the Constitution that I believe is going to come up from the Senate. And then in the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be putting together with the House Judiciary Chair at least a day, if not two, of hearing from the public, hearing from local officials, hearing from town officials here in Franklin County and in other counties where there have been some challenges with the sheriff. We saw in Orange County, weeks before the newly elected sheriff there was to take office, he just sent an email out saying, "I'm assuming command." Well, what does that mean? We got some questions that I think we need to at least put on the table and educate the public about. What is the role of the sheriff constitutionally? How is it set up? And do Vermonters want there to be a greater level of sort of requirement, professional qualifications, and the ability for the legislature to have more oversight and ability to tell sheriffs, how to conduct their business on behalf of the people, rather than just having an election every 4 years or an impeachment being the only options if we have a sheriff who isn't doing what they're doing. All that said, the vast majority of sheriffs that I've worked with over the years are incredible law enforcement professionals. They're doing great work. They care about their communities. They're in it for the right reasons. But we have at least a couple of situations here in the state of Vermont where the way that the sheriff's office has set up has allowed for things to happen that I think the vast majority of us think are really outside the bounds of what an executive law enforcement official should be able to do, but they're allowed to do it because of the independence we give the office in the Vermont state constitution. And I personally think that has to change, and I think the vast majority of legislators now are thinking we need to start a multi-year process of giving more legislative power over the office. But that's a long way of saying there aren't a lot of good options for us right now. If you're someone who's inclined to want to see a different person be the sheriff in the near future, it's going to be a process.
I didn't know it was a filibuster.
Sorry.
It was actually a really good explanation, and it's helpful for people like myself who don't really have background in law enforcement or the judiciary or the executive branch. You know, everything is kind of coming together here, and that was a great explanation. Thank you, Rep. McCarthy.
But if I could continue.
Sure.
Yes, we need to go down that path, but in 9 days, a man's going to take office that, from a media vision, is not fit, does not have the integrity, does not have the honesty that office, and he's the highest law enforcement office in any county, plus he has statewide jurisdiction. So the Constitution says what you can do as the House of Representatives, so you should just plain do it. And yes, whatever you do, don't do what they did in 1976 and say, oh, we're going to acquit him because we don't want to put ourselves in this position because we didn't get elected to be a judge and jury. Well, Constitution says one thing, patterns laid out for you, you need a resolution. There are some, he's been charged with a misdemeanor at this point in time in July in the Justice Council that will become one of the many items added to felony and other things. There is an egregious act. If there was nothing but the one resolution to at least stop him from serving, the way you've just said it, he'll serve out his entire term before you decide to do something about it.
So thank you for your opinion on that, and I
And
think I heard Rep. McCarthy say that there is going to be some sort of public hearing where the public is able to weigh in on this, which, we are elected officials and we make our decisions by what our constituents wish us to do. So I think a public hearing of many people from Franklin County is going to be very helpful in guiding our path. I see another question.
Yeah, Andre LeBeer from Montgomery. I think we need to clean our own house first. Both parties blindly endorsed this man. And these are sensitive positions. A perfunctory, cursory background check should have been done and completed. That would have eliminated the person. But nothing. We just blindly endorsed him. So we need to clean our own house first and have some kind of process so that when somebody runs for an elected office, we know who we're endorsing. Could have been, would you allow a pedophile to run? Just an example. We didn't do our work, and we didn't do it well, and now we're stuck. And we have nobody to blame but ourselves.
Thank you. Any more discussion on that topic?
Well, the beauty of the Vermont Constitution is a felon can run for office and be elected.
Well, if I might just quickly add something here. I think I stated that this dispatching was a very convoluted process. This one here rises above that. There's several steps that can be taken, and I'm not here to do a character reference on anybody running for any particular office, but also after taking an oath to defend the Constitution, I believe that we stated, the Constitution states that someone is presumed innocent until proven guilty. That may not be the case. I'm not here to say it is one way or the other, but that's still a Constitution that we live by. We do have a bill. We'll start taking testimony on Tuesday, S-17, which addresses sheriff's offices. But as far as the sheriff of the sheriff's office is the last constitutionally elected peace officer throughout the United States. I take great pride in that particular statement. I don't take great pride in attempting to explain behavior from what I refer to as bad characters within the office of sheriff. So it'll be a drawn-out process, as you all well know. Eric knows that it'll start in the House. 1976 case you're talking about, Sheriff Mayo out of Washington County was impeached in the House. It was marched over the Senate. They acquitted him. So I believe that was probably the last time, thank God, that we tried to acquit anybody, more importantly the sheriff, from that particular office. But I feel very confident that it will be addressed, it'll be looked at, there's certain boundaries we have to work within as far as what we can and can't do. But I'm sure that between GovOps, I don't know if the judiciary is going to get their hands on this or not, but it's not gone unnoticed, shall we say. And there's some disappointments throughout both the state of Vermont and Franklin County. So it's going to take some time, whether you're looking at decertification through the Vermont Criminal Justice Training Council, which someone had stated earlier. He don't need that. That's just for powers of arrest in order to perform his or her duties within the office. He or she can still perform the administrative functions of the Brady letter, which Representative McCarthy referred to through the State Attorney's Office, I believe has been served. I'm not for sure on that. But having said that, there's a trial coming up, and there's not a status conference or I forget until February. So, yeah, I mean, we as citizens in Franklin County, unfortunately, are going to have to slow this down a little bit and wait to see how it plays out. But in the interim, we're going to be addressing, I think, the office responsibilities and duties that go along with the office at the House and the Senate this year.
So, as a matter of, I agree with all that, but we as voters expect our representatives to do the right thing. And whether an impeachment is successful or not, I expect all of you to go on the record publicly and state that you're not for that. As simple as that. And that's the least. That's the least we can do about him taking office when the time comes. If he takes office and the time comes, I expect all our representatives to do the right thing and stand up, even though you may be headed down the road where they may not be successful.
But I've got a, it's not an argument with it, but you know what? He got voted in by some of the most numbers of votes in Franklin County. So when you say we should do the right thing, so we go against, I don't know what he got for votes. So we go against that because it's a tough situation. You know how I feel. That's my personal feeling.
And that's what we're
Okay.
expecting. We're expecting.
I have no problem with that, but since we talked, I've learned a lot of things in the procedures, and it's not as simple as we think. So that I agree, it's going to take time.
That's not what I'm saying.
I know.
Expect our representatives to, at least publicly when the time comes, to state.
Yep.
Okay, so, Andre, thank you. We've heard that 3 times. We know what's expected of us, and we are continuing to learn just as the public is continuing to learn about this issue. As Penny just stated, it's very complex. Bob stated the same thing, and certainly there's going to be a lot more discussion. Public hearing, please keep your eyes and ears open for that, because I really think that's where the public can express their opinion and give us direction, but we do have to follow the process. Representative Rush.
And I'm with you all. My concern all along is that we don't want to make any missteps. We don't know, and I'm not a legal expert, but we don't want to make missteps. And I think the caution that we're expressing here now is to make sure we don't make some misstep along the way.
And thank you for that. I appreciate that. Christine.
Just a question about public hearings. Is there a calendar that's available on the judiciary site or the legislative site that lists like the public hearings
Yes.
that are coming up?
On the front page of the General Assembly website, there'll be all public hearings will be listed on that, and how to access them, whether it's by live stream or contacting the committee of jurisdiction. You should be able to find your way pretty easily around that. So, any other questions from anyone? Concerns? Jan, you can please say your name and where you're from.
Anna Fell from St. Albans City. I don't know if anything's officially before the legislature in your house, but what are your positions regarding Medicare Advantage for retirees in the state?
I guess I'll take that one first. It is in my committee, and Representative McCarthy. We're starting to hear testimony on that from the administration, from the unions from retirees. I've gotten calls from retirees. So I'm in the information gathering stage about that. I'm not quite at the age for Medicare yet, so it's kind of been a blur to me. So I have to learn it from the ground up, and that's where I intend to stay for a while, is in that learning stage. And that's the beauty of being in the legislature. We're able to call in testimony from all different types of organizations so that we can hear every side of the issue, because one side is just that, it's one-sided. So in order to make a decision, we need to be fully aware of all of the consequences and burdens and benefits for all constituents and for, obviously, our pocketbooks. Do you want to say something more?
Yeah, so we had testimony from the commissioner of the Department of Human Resources that laid out the administration's proposal. They essentially want to take, right now they're required under statute to have retired state employees be in the same healthcare plan as active state employees that are currently working. And it's the opinion of a lot of folks, including some of the folks on legislative council that are like our nonpartisan lawyers, that really the administration can't make a change this big under current law. So it puts us in a strange thing. So if you're of the opinion that I am, where in the long run the cost savings that have been proposed don't really justify the kind of risk in putting the retired state employees in a position where they may not have access to the same benefits. We heard a lot of testimony from the administration that, you know, in the initial round, that, you know, the providers that retired state employees would have access to would be the same, and that their pharmaceutical benefits might be the same or better. But what we see nationally with the Medicare Advantage plans is that you're essentially taking what is, you know, a publicly administered plan directly, and you're allowing this third party, this for-profit business, to administer the benefits, and the way that they get those savings inevitably is going to be in a reduction of access to providers or benefits. I mean, there's no way to offer savings in a system like this without having some reduction of benefits if the economy of scale is the same. So I'm really concerned about the administration's proposal. I believe it's probably illegal for them to make that switch unilaterally and not engage in a negotiation with the state employees union and the retired state employees association around it, and come to us with some legislative action. So I think one way or another, this proposal probably will not be allowed to happen. The question I'm asking myself as a legislator who doesn't support the administrative proposal and already thinks it's illegal is like, okay, so our job is to essentially to pass laws, right? Well, if there's already a law that says that we don't think it's allowed to happen, then it's kind of between the unions and the administration. And so we're left kind of scratching our heads a little bit at why there isn't more of a negotiation about this, as opposed to sort of coming to the legislature and saying the administration thinks one thing and the unions think another thing, and then we're just left there hearing, you know, sort of a he said, she said, and that we're not, as a citizen legislature, we're not very well equipped to sort of go, oh, we think that their version of the story is the right one and their version's not. But I think the chances of this proposal actually happening are very, very low. And I would say I just gave you, you know, I told you I disagree with it. I gave you the sort of, the kind of soft version. I think if you talk to Senator Hardy or some other folks that are in my party in the Senate, they're like, heck no, no way, we're not going to allow this to happen. So I want to work with the administration, but on this particular thing, I just don't think the juice is worth the squeeze, and we should not go forward with this Medicare Advantage switch.
One comment as a retiree. The union negotiated that pensions, a few other things, back in, I think, in the 90s, when we didn't get any pay increase. It was like, here's something for the future. You don't get any money now. And so now they're coming back and taking away those things for people who were employed and didn't get the benefit of pay raises at the time. And so, I mean, so it's it's the same argument in some respects, process argument as with the pension. And I mean, it's this, so I appreciate what you have to say. They also, as retirees, we heard about it through word of mouth. It leaked out. It wasn't even that there was something put out publicly that we could respond to. But
If I could just thank you for bringing up how this was negotiated. I appreciate that piece of information, and I will say that retirees, at least the ones who called me, did receive a letter from their unions
that was after they
telling,
started talking about it.
yeah.
It was after we started contacting the union about it.
So, thank you. Wayne?
Yeah, for full disclosure, I'm a retired state employee also, so I don't know any of the details. I'm not privy to any of those details in terms of the cost savings or anything going on there, but I'm very concerned. And so I'd have to know a lot more before I would go along with the proposal.
I mean, people have the choice of the state benefits, or they can get their own Medicare Advantage. It's not that they have, the only way they can get health insurance, the supplemental, is through the state. So, I mean, people already have that option. And one of the providers that they're talking about is Cigna, and it was, that's why the union, the state employees went to the self-managed system.
And I'm physically conservative, so, you know, if I knew that we would get as good as what we have, and we could save $9 million a year, I'd be voting for it, but I've got to be convinced.
And if I might just add to that, Jane, I don't know where to begin with this. And we've taken no official testimony on it. I've heard from both sides, both the VSEA, several of my constituents throughout Franklin County, and I've heard from administration. I think that the concern with me is that the administration has basically said that we don't need legislative approval for this, and the VSEA and certain legislators are saying, no, you do need legislative approval for this, and they've sold it as it's only a 3-year contract. We can back out of it. We can change it, whatever else. But until both Mike and Lisa and I know that it's coming up at some point in time in our committee, such as many other bills are. But we're going to take a close look at it, obviously. And at this point in time, I haven't been sold one way or the other. So, and I'm concerned about it too for everyone within Franklin County. Full disclosure, to include myself, as to how this is going to affect everybody. So we're not just going to let it pass through, but it's that legislative thing where they say we can do it, and we're saying, well, you can't do it, and so that'll have to be hashed out in the brush here. So.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Good morning, I'm Jonathan Billings from St. Albans City, work at Northwestern Medical Center, and just wanted to encourage you as you go forward to look at long-term care within the state. This weekend, we were nearly full with inpatients at the hospital, but 11 of those patients were in the hospital awaiting nursing home placement. And I think you'll find that that's the case all across Vermont. Earlier this month, University of Vermont Medical Center's entire network was full, inpatient-wise, and they had more than 80 people waiting nursing home placement. And I think you'll find that some of those folks thought that they had health insurance that turns out to be very difficult for our long-term care facilities to accept because of the reimbursements. And so as you ask yourself, how do they achieve savings? Keep pulling at that string. Anything the legislature can do that makes long-term care a more viable business in our communities and makes it more possible for communities to care for people in their community is a great help. It helps the families, keeping people local, it helps the individual, obviously. But for us as an inpatient facility, it allows us to discharge patients once they no longer need the level of care we provide. We're designed for acute care, and to have someone stay in the hospital 100 days, 200 days, waiting for placement, not unusual, but at the same time a tremendous cost to the state. And so we get that. And you've heard me talk before, the other piece to this is access to inpatient mental health care, and how do we boost that that resource within Vermont, so Vermonters who, at that time of life with those challenges, can get the care they need as opposed to being held in emergency departments. And there's no great answer that I offer you. I don't even really have a question for you. But as you go forward, I leave you with three thoughts: that anything you can do to strengthen workforce development, housing, and childcare helps workforce in all businesses. I just had a chance Friday to talk to Betsy Bishop from the Vermont Chamber of Commerce. It was interesting to talk healthcare, and our focus was housing, childcare, and workforce development. And so we share that with business and industry. So thank you. Appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Those are probably the top three things that I've heard from all legislative committees that we're going to be working on: housing, workforce development, childcare. And Alan is on the healthcare committee, so he may have a few words to say.
Well, agree with you fully. Our committee pretty much agrees with you fully. We've been taking testimony for 2 weeks pretty much on all this, and it is a concern. I think our committee realizes that it's a big concern, and it's addressing how we go about that. I don't know how, I'm a new legislature. I'm not sure what we do, then it refers it to probably the Human Resource Committee. I'm not sure, but it is a big priority, all those things you said in our committee at this time.
Andre?
Same.
Oh, sorry.
I'm on institutions and corrections and institutions, and so, again, the last 2 weeks, we've been pretty much doing the same thing as well as touring around. Of course, we're dealing with corrections as well as, facilities, other facilities. We did take a tour last week of the new facilities being built down in Essex. It's a 16-bed facility, and so working on those things is a very, we get a very good awareness of the problem. We've had testimony. We know with the prison system, there's not enough beds of the right types of beds, and we have a whole, like 500 people that are on, that's where they run off there. When they're in there,
I'm sorry?
They haven't been charged. They've been charged, but they haven't been arraigned yet. They're retention. We got like 500 people that are in retention that haven't gone to court yet, and they're taking up beds that where other people could be. So we're trying to talk about that. We'll be having the court come in and explain to us what the problems are there, and we're also looking at changes to prisons. A lot of aging prisons, and so there's going to be work on deciding where to spend money to make improvements to those. We know we have a mental health issue and not enough spaces, the right kinds of places for those people. And so we're getting testimony on all of those issues, and hopefully we'll be able to at least spend some of the money to at least move it forward. Knowing that we're not going to be able to solve this problem fast. Just to build something will take 5 years, probably 4 or 5 years. So it's going to be an ongoing process.
Thank you. I saw Andre's hand go up.
Just want to make some comments about retirees. I'm in my 70s, and I'm in that category. I think sometimes we forget that Vermont is the oldest state in the country with the lowest birth rate. But to me, that translates into a growing population of people on fixed income who are, the tax burden it's the spine of our tax base. Inflation has hit us, and it's hit retirees, and it's hit the elderly people a lot more than anybody else. So when it comes to spending, I'm really asking folks to be really physically conservative, because we're at a saturation point, at a real saturation point. Just my comment on that.
Some of the spending, of course, the ARPA money, the federal money that we received, there's still ARPA money available. We're going to be trying to get that out and leverage that money, but it's going to be gone in another year.
So all these new programs and spending, it's really going to take a toll.
So I just want to comment on the governor's budget, that his budget was primarily using one-time money for the programs that are outlined if you read the text of the the speech that he made on Friday. And definitely, that would be the money that's already been allocated to the state of Vermont, which is about $1 billion. Mike, you had your hand up?
Yeah, so I think for a long time, the demographic story in Vermont was all we're seeing is the age and the decline that you talked about. And we are obviously still a very old state. But in the last couple of years, what we saw was an influx of a number of people who were coming to Vermont as sort of COVID refugees or climate refugees, and the amount of remote work has allowed people to get out of cities. I think about my friend Jordan Ostrander, who left New York City, is working, remotely, and then started kind of a small business on the side. He lives in Sheldon. So like, there's a whole shifting thing that's happening, and one of the things that we're looking at right now to sort of ease the tax burden on folks who, they're living in their homes, and they're the homes they've been in, they're trying to stay in their home while they retire, they're on a fixed income, is to look at how much of our housing is paying the non-residential rate, paying a lower tax rate for that housing on the property tax, but it's actually being used as a short-term rental or a vacation home. We have one of the highest housing vacancy rates in the country, even though there's so little housing that's available for sale for families and Vermonters to move into. And so one of the things that we're really looking at is thinking about who pays, not just sort of what we spend the money on. And to, Jonathan had brought up, workforce and childcare issues, as well as housing. And housing, we're taking that federal money and we're trying to figure out how to get it out the door effectively, and that's on a lot of our minds. But I want to focus on the workforce and the childcare for a second, because that's one of the key areas where if we want to have the kind of tax base, the sort of economy that can support the aging population and continue to take advantage of the professional and working age workforce that does want to raise families here. I mean, I'm 38 years old, I have a 10-year-old daughter. Vermont's an absolutely fantastic place to live. We need more people like me here paying taxes so that we can support retirees. We should be a state that's welcoming. We have a lot of jobs right now, and what we're trying to do is make sure that we're a place where employers will continue to want to invest because we have the workforce. There are thousands of Vermonters who are sitting on the sideline of that workforce right now because they can't get access to quality, affordable childcare. And that's, I think, why folks like Jonathan, who are employers and working in industries that don't have anything directly to do with childcare, have been coming to us for years in the legislature and saying, you've got to fix this problem. People can't put their young children in childcare. And so one of the priorities for me for years, one of the things I ran on was, we're gonna actually fix this childcare system. And I think that in the context of, is this just spending? That really truly is an investment. And the governor agrees, actually, with Democrats like me, that we need to invest significantly in childcare. What he proposed in his budget won't nearly be enough to actually do what we need to do. So that's where our debate and our work is going to come for the next couple of years, and I'm looking forward to working with the administration to fix that, because if we're going to have the tax base that can support the aging population, we have to have the workforce, and they have to be able to find places to put their kids and places to live.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. We know what the solution is and we know what has to be done. It doesn't change the fact that the retirees and the middle class people can't afford it. That's the balance that has to be.
And that's a big concern of mine. Being a new legislature, we're going from this healthcare to daycare to, I don't know how the small piece of working class people in the state of Vermont are going to foot the bill for this. It's a big concern of mine. It's more overwhelming than I expected, and I agree, we do need daycare. But I think the proposal, one of them, $279 million. And this one says, well, we can raise the income tax 2%, or we can raise the rate of small businesses 1%. We can add 1% to the sales tax. I said, wait a minute, who is that hurting? And I have the same concern you do. I'm a retiree, and I don't know about Chittenden County. Franklin County is up to its neck. So that's my concern.
And I think we're all very, very aware of that. We all have family members, friends, neighbors who are on fixed incomes. And even for folks who are making a living, just going to the grocery store or the gas pump is a whole lot more expensive today than it was a year ago. Jan?
There was an article, a recent article in the New York Times that pointed out that our birth rate, it has slowed. And so everybody is getting older by the moment. And so that we are going to be focusing, we're talking about, there's childcare for the young, and we've got to bring in all these young people to support the old people. It's a shifting economy. And so I think, first of all, one of the things is we need to think about caregiving across the ages and what it means to also be a working person caring for their young children and their sick husband or their elderly parents, and the demands on them. And I mean, we have to be fiscally responsible, but one of the things is there's a lot of old people who are currently working, earning money. And there's a lot of elderly people who are working for nothing because they're volunteering and they're filling up a lot of positions and doing a lot of work that agents, especially the nonprofits, can afford. So I think in some respects it's taking a look at this from a different angle if we're going to be prepared for going into the future and being fiscally responsible about it.
Thank you. Christy?
If I can just expand upon that. I'm curious to know, is there a think tank that's involved with all of this? Meaning, do we think out of the box? So we all know that, brick and mortar stores are going out of business. We've got these strip malls that are out there with no businesses in them. I remember starting a job where I would have people hand deliver the mail because I didn't want to spend the money on a stamp. You have to think out of the box when it comes to these things. And so is there a think tank that comes up with that type of thing?
I just want to say one thing. I think there are a lot of think tanks in Vermont. Vermont has the highest percentage of nonprofit organizations and agencies and advocacy groups in the country. So there are a lot of people thinking in Vermont. And I think the problem lies in they're all bombarding the legislature with their ideas. And we have to choose what are the best pieces of each idea. So that's why legislation takes so long to pass. You think, oh yeah, you can go to Montpelier and pass a bill. It's only going to take a week or so. That really doesn't happen. Wayne had something to add to that.
Along those lines, and on a child care issue, last year I was on Commerce and Economic Development. We took a lot of testimony on child care. And we've got 1,200 to 1,300 registered child care facilities in the state. The turnover is about 50% per year. So if you can dump a lot of money. It's like if you drive a car down the road and get a flat tire. You pull into the filling station, you fill the car up and try to drive off. You don't fix that problem. And so the questions I asked were, what's the root problem for this turnover? And I got the regulations. I think there's 124 pages. And I didn't read them all. I just flipped randomly open to one. And the first thing I read was if you have children in diapers in your daycare, you have to check their diapers to see if they're soiled every 15 minutes. So I don't know how many of you have, I never had any children. How many of you ever checked your children's diapers every 15 minutes? So the question then is, what else is in these regulations that might be discouraging people from having these daycares? Because not only do they have a daycare, but the state is actually providing money to fix the daycares up so that they're up to code, so that they are, meet the standards for having the children in those. They're turning over every 50% every year. Is that a good, what kind of investment? Are we getting a return on our investment for that? I don't know. But if we don't ask the right questions, we can throw money at something forever, and we won't solve the problem unless the right question's asked. And then everybody wants their children to be in a safe and proper environment when those children are taken care of. So perhaps a good look at those regulations should be made so that we know that proper care is being provided, but other things that might be causing people to leave the workforce are not in there. Workforce is a big problem. Our prison system right now, I mean, people are working 12-hour shifts because they don't have enough employees. You know, we've got businesses all over the place that don't have enough employees. The hospital doesn't have enough employees. It's not just not having enough employees, but not enough housing for them to live in. And it's causing all these problems. If we don't look at the root problem and solve the pinch points, we are not going to fix the problem, no matter how much money we spend.
Amy?
I was going to change the subject a little bit. Did you want to comment on this?
Yeah, if I could.
Please.
Darryl from Fairfield. Just to piggyback on that, I mean, is there any look at deregulation of any of these types of, let the private sector kind of kick in? Because, again, maybe someone in the room might be able to point out better than I can, but I just learned of some of the restrictions that, or regulations that childcare has to go through. Like, they have to have, the director has to have a master's degree, then they have to have someone on the site that has a 4-year degree. I can't remember the exact, kind of goes down the line to who's there and how many people are on the site. So again, I can't say that I know growing up, I mean, watched by the local grandmother or whatever, things seem to be fine without having to have a master's degree, even though I agree with it, it's a good idea. But then trying to get that cost down, I mean, obviously somebody that just came out of school with a master's degree, probably has a student loan, they can't do it for $20 an hour. So I mean, you kind of look at some of the regulations, same with our housing. I mean, over the years, just the housing market, I mean, I think we all agree that we love to live where we live. However, a lot of the regulation on, development and so forth over the years has kind of gotten us to this point. Pick on Mr. Carter with the Affordable Care Act coming, on energy, with the village of Venusburg, we're looking at a solar and a backup storage. With backup storage is basically a big battery, so we can provide backup storage if power rates get high. So we're doing the solar and the backup storage in the same exact location, but we have to go through the Act 250 permit twice. And a lot of the regulation that we have to go through is all being duplicated, even though the project is in the same exact spot. Having to do soil testing and all that type of stuff. So it just seems like there's some regulation there that, if it got cleared out of the way, can streamline some of these projects. Again, so I can't put a shovel into the ground for at least another year just to get through regulation on that solar project. So I'm in agreement with going electrification. It's just getting there. It's pushing a rock uphill type of thing.
I'll tackle the first couple points that you made. Deregulation of childcare probably will not happen anytime soon. We, meaning the legislatures prior to us, very recently built those regulations in response to a tragic incident that happened at a daycare. So those regulations may stand. However, I have just recently signed on to a bill that is proposing that right now families under a certain income level receive subsidies for childcare, and currently they can only receive childcare at a facility that is rated a certain number of stars. And in this area, this remote area, we don't have maybe but one facility that's rated that highly. And it has to do with how many personnel are there, with the type of education you need, and a whole bunch of other criteria. So this bill proposes to lower the number of stars that the facility can have, and the families can send their children there and still receive a state subsidy. And that subsidy bill was passed a couple of years ago. So we're working on childcare. I can assure you we're working on deregulation of the housing industry. There are a number of housing bills out there. Many of them have been in the press lately. I've signed on to at least 2 of them that propose to deal with municipal regulation and Act 250. I agree with you, Act 250 is onerous and it's duplicative in many cases. You just mentioned you have to get a permit twice for the same piece of land. That's ridiculous. So we're working on those. Energy, I'm going to let Representative McCarthy have a word if he has anything to add to that.
I would love it if somebody would streamline the energy regulations. I try and stay away from that because that's my day job. But to your point on that one, I would like, if we could do battery storage and solar as one permit, that probably will be discussed. And I think battery storage, our regulations haven't caught up with like where the industry is right now and where Vermont's going, because large scale storage hasn't kind of been on the radar. Like, it probably shouldn't even be subject to Act 250. It should just be a Section 248 thing, and it should go along just like solar does and be in an alternative path. But the greater conversation about deregulation, especially when you look at something like housing, it's fascinating the conversation that's happening right now in the legislature. I signed on to Representative Bongart's housing package, which is all about deregulating the housing where we want it, right? So if you're talking about downtowns, village centers, places that have water and wastewater infrastructure, we're deregulating. We're gonna hear a lot of town officials come in when that bill gets testimony and say, you should not be telling our local town that we have to have more housing density. Don't make us do that. It's gonna change the character of what our neighborhoods look like. We wanna have a certain number of parking spaces per unit, and we wanna have this regulation because we like the way things are now. And so the tension between we all wanna see housing and the people who say, well, just don't do it in my backyard, is where the conversation is. And we are looking at those regulations, and we're gonna have a big, huge, hairy debate that I hope you'll all contact your legislators, tell us what you're comfortable with, tell us what your town, what you want it to look like, because everybody keeps talking about housing, but when we talk about deregulating it, that means there might be types of housing in your neighborhood that weren't allowed before. And for a lot of folks in Vermont, they like the way their neighborhood looks, and they don't want to see different kinds of housing or more housing in it. And so that's where the regulation has kept everything quaint. I love the way my neighborhood is in St. Albans City. But if I wanted to make it a little bit easier for me, my neighbor, to have a duplex or a triplex instead of just a single family home on their lot, that's deregulation, and that's going to be hard for a lot of neighborhoods, I think. That's the tension that we're going to be diving into, and I think it's time for us to really have those conversations. On the child care side, there are some things actually where I believe that Representative Wood, who chairs the House Human Services, is going to look at sort of getting the regulations right, because that big bill that we passed in response to the tragic event probably swung a little bit too far in the direction. So if you want to get state subsidy, you have to do a whole huge 124-page list of things. Some of it is going to get right-sized, and we'll continue to look at that. So a lot of the work that we do that doesn't make the headlines, so we passed a big bill that adopts the regulation in response to an incident. Then over the next few years, we hear from providers, we hear from parents, and we start chipping away at the edges of those things so that we kind of get it right. The childcare system, the housing system, what Vermonters expect versus what they can get right now, those are two big areas of our economy that are kind of broken, where the marketplace doesn't work. And so the legislature is now hosting these conversations, trying to figure out the answers to really thorny issues, because people care about their neighborhoods. They care about where their kids are when they're at work. And we want to make sure that we get it right, that we have the housing that people need, that we have the child care spots that people need, that it's good quality, and that their children won't get lost or hurt or sick. So we're weighing those things, and these are conversations I take really seriously, and I know everybody else here does too.
Does anyone else have any comments along those lines? Housing, child care, deregulation, regulation? And if not, Amy?
Good morning. I'm so glad that we're back together. I missed this last year, and so I'm very happy to be here. My name is Amy Brewer. I'm a health educator at Northwestern Medical Center. I coordinate the Franklin Grand Isle Tobacco Prevention Coalition, and I'm in the business of doing what I can to keep people healthy, right? So it's all fun for me. It's all positive, and down the line saves money, saves lives, all those kinds of things. I don't have a question, but I wanted to let you know what I'm hearing in the communities as far as tobacco, and to let you know that I'm always a resource for you, whether it's data or anything related to tobacco. It's my bailiwick. I've been in a whole lot of middle schools talking with kids about vaping. I was in 28 different middle school classrooms last quarter, and what I'm hearing is flavored products are still very, very appealing. Kids are very, very curious. They're very, very marketed to by the companies directly. Social media is part of that, and the kids are curious. The other thing that I'm hearing universally is that kids continue to use these products because they feel stress, anxiety, and depression. One or all of the above, and the kids have adopted the message that these things solve those problems, right? And we know that they don't. We're trying to teach the kids that, but they're getting that message, and so that's why they have mental health concerns, challenges, confusion, feelings, and they're turning to this product to help them to do that. The companies really drive that home, and I'll add the additional part of the confusion is the cannabis industry. Kids think that cannabis is a treatment for stress, anxiety, and depression. And so the kids are adopting the use of these products in droves, and we're trying to get to them at the middle school level, even as low as 3rd grade, to help them understand that better. The other things that I would encourage you to to pay attention to is one of the things that we did when we passed, you all thankfully passed Tobacco 21, is we made a mistake and we didn't make it equitable. In other words, we have a population of Abenaki individuals who use tobacco ceremonially, traditionally, not in an addictive way and not in a harmful way, and yet there's language in there that punishes anybody who's under 21 for possessing a tobacco product. And so looking at possible language to repair that, even just using language of traditional versus commercial, and making that distinction. So there'll be more on that. You're going to ask something?
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, did that not get included? Because I remember having that discussion. My former committee dealt a lot with Native American affairs, and we had that discussion maybe in the context of a different bill. And I really thought that got passed with Tobacco 21. So,
And I'll just say,
if you have the language in the bill, could you send that to me, please?
it's not yet put into a bill, but I think it will be.
But you said you saw language or language has been seen in the other bill that makes it?
It's not included, so there's no distinction included. What we
Okay.
need to do is find
Okay.
language that
Got
would
it.
make it safe for young people who are using it traditionally.
Is there a legislator who's already sponsoring that? Representative Chino, maybe?
I believe so.
Okay.
Did you say?
Yes.
Maybe.
Representative.
I've got to leave, I got a doctor's appointment. One of the things I didn't realize about being a legislature, you got to do everything on Monday. But I want to say thank you for everybody for attending. This is one of my first legislative breakfasts on this side of the table. It's new to me, but I don't care what district you're from. If you've got any concerns, give your senators or legislatures a call and hold them accountable, me included, and just remind them the unintended consequences of everything we do. I think one of the reasons I ran is because of that reason. We pass things, we do things, and then down the road we say, oh, we gotta change that, or we gotta do this, or we didn't do it right. And it is frustrating, and there's a lot to it, but I'll do my best, and feel free to get hold of me anytime. So, thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Gotta run.
So, please do touch base before January 31st, which is the bill submission deadline, because if there is indeed somebody already working on it, we can work with him as well to connect you to him. Did you want to say anything about vapes and cannabis at all? Because that's in our committee right now. We're having a little bit of a discussion about it. I mean, we heard from a representative anecdotally recently that kids can get this off the internet. Like, where are they getting it?
So, I brought this as well, you can share it, because I didn't want to pick up 8 million copies.
Thank you.
Some pictures that are telling. It is illegal for young people, actually it's illegal for vapes to be shipped in the mail. Thank you very much for that policy. It's just a little whack-a-mole kind of situation, and our Attorney General is going after folks. Okay. But it's one at a time, and it's through, it's through a legal process, and it is not simple. The FDA is also going after unauthorized companies, of which that's what I'm sharing, but it's really, really tough. It's not like it's just Reynolds or British American Tobacco, right? There's not just, these vape companies are coming out of nowhere. They sell knockoffs of each other's. It is a regulation nightmare.
Yeah, so where are you purchasing these? Is it primarily online purchases that are really illegal, or are there folks selling flavored cartridges here illicitly?
It's not, I don't think they're going to the jockey. Okay, the research says that they're not really getting it there. Most kids get it from someone they know, an older family member, or an older individual, right? Or, there's some individual who's lucky enough to kind of land some and share it. I know that we're on TV, but you can YouTube pretty much anything and get quite an information of how to do stuff.
Good in that.
But yeah, in this case, how to get what you want in a brown box at your doorstep. So feel free to YouTube it on your own time. I certainly have. So that's not a problem that I think you all can fix, because I think we have laws that do that. But pay attention to flavored, which California has just banned. The FDA has talked about it, and it'll take probably another decade before that law comes into effect. Vermont can be more fluid and more protective. I don't know. Oh, and my last soapbox is I really wish that we would stop talking about recreational marijuana, because that's part of what kids are misunderstanding. Right. That marijuana or cannabis is not recreational, much like a basketball game is. It's still a drug. It's still unsafe for young people to use with their developing brains. I would really encourage you to adopt retail versus, retail cannabis as the phrase, so that kids aren't continually hearing that this is recreational.
I think we've been doing a good job in House Gov Ops on this, of saying retail cannabis versus medical cannabis and not using the other R word. We've been jargon busting and being a language police a little bit to try to set, level set expectations with our new committee. I will tell you that in most of the House, you're looking at committees like ours where you've got 3 total new members, 8 members who are new to government operations. There are only 2 members who have jurisdictional experience with the liquor and lottery portfolio. And so there's a lot of just learning happening right now. So we've talked about a whole bunch of different issues today. On every single committee, you've got people who are brand new to their jobs trying to, as citizen legislators, just absorb an enormous amount of information. And so we need you, we need Amy, we need your, yeah, please, please reach out to us. If I don't know, Lisa, if you want to, once we kind of break, I'm happy to give my cards to people.
Yes,
we need you all. We're your representatives. We are not experts on all this stuff that we sit up here and opine about, and yeah.
And we're always appreciative of Amy coming to every single legislative breakfast, even when they were on Zoom, and bringing her message about tobacco and cannabis now. So we really appreciate it. Thank you. Does anyone, yes.
I will step right up. Thank you for checking 9 out of 10 things off my list. My name is Mary Pickner, and I'm a substance use prevention consultant with the state of Vermont. So echoing Amy, one of the things that has come to our community is the legalization and the licensing. And so living in St. Albans, there is a place that is advertising THC 8. And it was put on the illegal substance list this past year. And there is gaps between who covers that. The response that I had received from the Cannabis Board was
that they're going to take care of their retail establishments. And me, maybe not always having the most altruistic way of looking at business, thought, wow, if I did not have a license, I could sell whatever I wanted because nobody is minding the shop, right? And so as a person in the public would see the advertising and assume that there was a retail license. And as the person purchasing, I would not necessarily know that unless I asked specifically. The same shop had also advertised THC gummies. And so there is a little bit for me a concern around obviously who is monitoring all of this. But one of the things that I did discover was that I was told that THC-8 is going to be legal. And I was like, how does that happen if you're already on the illegal substance list? Turns out there was a bill in Ag last spring that mentioned in it that it was going to legalize THC 8 and 10, even though in another bill, it was, at least THC 8 was made illegal. And so I'm hoping that when we think about cannabis, retail or otherwise, that there are other bills going on that maybe the left hand doesn't know what the right is, and I realize how busy, and it is literally one, 6 words in one very long bill. And so that's one thing that I am concerned about. And also echoing what Amy talks about is access and availability, and the interest and the excitement around the legalization of cannabis also increases lethality, as with everything. And so I always have a concern about how do we keep our children safe? How do we keep these products out of the hands of children? How do they not have access to a million different visualizations? And traditionally, alcohol did not have advertising on television, and I actually don't have cable, so I have streaming services. Some have advertising. There's an increasing amount of alcohol advertising, even when I'm watching cartoons with my niece and nephew. And so that is, I would prefer that to not happen, and also to not happen with any other legal substance that we have. So I want to thank you for your time. I am available. Please seek me out. And as Mary Pickener, member of St. Albans Town, not a state employee, there is a fantastic report about this Medicare Advantage from the feds, federal government, that is saying that it's not such a great idea. And my experience working when the federal government comes out with a big old report and says it's not good, they have really dug into it. So, and I will be happy to share that with you when I find it again. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you for coming out here.
Appreciate that. I know one of the things when we voted on retail cannabis was that there was to be no visible advertising, and I will say right here in this forum, if anybody knows me, you know that I voted against retail cannabis, so I'm not a fan, but I'll let Chair McCarthy talk about the advertising piece.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Glowing green plus sign.
Yeah, so we do not have in the 5 minutes that's left here enough time to get into all of the nuances here, but what I will say is I'm really deeply committed to us having consumer safety, making sure that so the overarching theory of what the Cannabis Control Board is trying to do, and that we are trying to create the laws and the regulations, is about getting rid of the illicit market that doesn't care what's in the product, right? Having a market where like we have with alcohol control, in terms of especially the higher concentration control in the state, we've limited the availability to minors by having it be a regulated substance. That's not perfect. I don't think there is a perfect solution, but we're in a state of transition right now from a place where everything was on the illicit market. Now some things are in the legal market, and one of the gray areas that we need to do more on clearly is that people are taking from what are considered hemp, not cannabis, they're industrially processing and taking out a psychoactive chemical that is not the regulated one. So the regulated one, regular old THC, people are taking the Delta 8 THC out of it, creating high concentration products. And then it was the Wild West. We did start the process of bringing that under the canopy of our regulated environment, but there is not an enforcement mechanism to go after that place that is just like, hey, we got the Delta 8 THC here. So we need to do more on that clearly this year when we do, when we take up the Cannabis Control Board's omnibus bill. Most of what we're doing this year is like, we just set up the retail licensing, we're kind of trying to make sure that the stuff that we did, what's really working, what's not working, do sort of emergency triage on it. But we have a retail cannabis market now in Vermont. And now it's about making sure that we live up to the commitment that we made in terms of keeping it out of the hands of minors and making sure the products that are sold are safe to consume.
We have about 3 more minutes. John, did you have something you were wanting to say? Okay. Okay, so it's the Delta 8, yeah.
Cannabis, and that's what is legal, what's we call THC 9, and then out of hemp you can process a whole lot of hydrocannabinoid, but 8 and 10 are ones that are also psychoactive and processed very differently than you would pulling THC 9 out of a cannabis plant. A lot of them, yeah. I could talk for hours on this.
So I really want to take a minute to thank everyone for their time this morning, coming all the way out to Richford. For those of you who came from St. Albans, I want to thank the town of Richford for the facility today and the use of their coffee machine. Invite everyone to take a snack or a drink on your way out. I really apologize for the legislators who could not be here today. Every single one of them had a really good reason for not being here, ranging from lack of childcare to being sick. So thank you all so much, and thank you to Northwest Access TV for making this a publicly accessible meeting for folks who can watch it on YouTube later on.
Thank you, Lisa, for facilitating.
My pleasure.